Malgrog Ironheart woke to the sound of a horn blowing in the distance. He grunted, rolled over in his bed, and pulled a scratchy woolen blanket over his head. This muffled the sound, but the horrible horn blower seemed determined to torment him, and continued blasting away. Bugger off, Malgrog growled, curling up into a ball and squeezing his eyes tightly shut. But it was no good. He was now awake. Bastard! Malgrog cursed through gritted teeth. Horn-blowing bastard. The last thing Malgrog wanted was to be conscious. Consciousness meant that the pounding headache he usually didn't feel until sunrise had a chance to assault him now, in the middle of the night. Consciousness meant he could feel how full his bladder was. A knowledge that carried with it an onerous obligation to actually do something about it. Above all, consciousness meant memories. And memories were less welcome than plague rats in Malgrog's ramshackle excuse for a shack. The furious dwarf took out his frustration on the blankets, kicking the unsuspecting coverings off himself in a sudden fit of wild violence. Bastard! Bloody bastard! He set his large hairy feet upon the wooden floor and stood up. He waited patiently for the room to finish its annoying habit of spinning crazily whenever he stood. Then he shuffled forward, feeling his way in the darkness like a blind dwarf. Malgrog's headache had leaped at the chance to kick in early, and was already bashing merrily away at the inside of his eyeballs with little war hammers. Luckily, his kitchen bench was almost completely covered with restorative fluids in large glass bottles. After knocking a few of these over and hurling an empty one into the corner of his shack, he finally came across a full bottle. There you are, he said affectionately, before he raised the bottle to his lips and drank. The ale was warm, stale, and flat, but Malgrog chugged it down like a starving calf at its mother's teat. When the bottle had been drained, he placed it on the bench, belched enormously, and struck out for the front door. All he needed to do now was take a piss, kill that horn-blowing bastard, and go back to sleep again. He emerged into his front yard and navigated his way by moonlight through waist-high weeds and piles of rubbish to his favourite pissing corner. It was as Malgrog stood there, groaning with relief and looking up at the stars, that a very troubling thought began to push its way through the half-drunk, half-asleep cloudiness of his mind. That horn. That stupid, annoying horn. It wasn't just some arsehole dwarf trumpeting away for a laugh. Those were warning blasts coming from Longdale's watchtower. You utter bastards! Malgrog swore up at the stars and whatever half-witted gods had created them. I'm not going. He finished his business, tied up the drawstring on his baggy night pants, and stalked determinedly towards his front door. He even managed to wrap his fingers around the handle before he turned and squinted back towards the town. From his front yard, on the absolute outskirts of Longdale, Malgrog could see nothing out of the ordinary. But, now that he was really focusing, he could faintly hear some other noises. The unmistakable clang of swords falling upon shields resonated in the far distance. Shouts of fury and pain winded their way to his fleshy ears on the night breeze, and high-pitched screams of terror cut through it all. Malgrog opened his front door and stepped into his shack. He was all too familiar with the sounds that were coming from the centre of Longdale, and wasn't in any particular hurry to reacquaint himself with the sights that generally accompanied them. He stumbled back to the kitchen bench and groped around for another bottle of ale. When he came across a full one, he found that his hands were shaking so badly he could barely raise the damn thing to his mouth. Grog stubbornly persevered and managed to spill only half the contents down his chin and into his wild grey beard as he drank. The horn continued to blow. Bollocks! Grog threw the empty bottle against a wall. The shouts and screams were growing louder. Here ye fucking balls of the Ancient Ones! Grog turned and stormed back out into his front yard. Halfway to the gap in the fence, where his gate used to be, he stopped dead. He swiveled on the spot, returned to his shack to retrieve his axe, remembered that he sold it several weeks ago to pay for beer, and stormed back outside again. The skyline above the city of Longdale was now flushed with a faint red glow. Grog knew this sure as shit wasn't the beginnings of a lovely sunrise. The city lay to the west of him. Nope, there was fire. A lot of fire. Perfect! Grog exclaimed to no one at all. Right, bloody perfect! The inebriated dwarf set off down the narrow dirt path, which led to a slightly wider path, which led to the outermost houses and streets of Longdale. He cursed as he walked, cursed and wheezed. He hadn't marched this briskly since leaving the army, and his fitness levels were worse than those of a pregnant sow. His talent for cursing, however, was still prolific. Grog! A husky whisper from Grog's right interrupted a particularly creative string of vulgarity. Who's that? He hissed back. It's me, Hemmig. Hemmig, go inside, Grog said, squinting at the single lantern, which was bobbing its way towards him from the front of the old dwarven woman's house. There's some kind of trouble happening in town. Oh, is there, Grog? Hemmig's raspy voice was coated thickly with sarcasm. And here was me, thinking the watchtower horn and all that screaming was nothing to worry about. All right, fine, you've heard it, said Grog. So what are you doing out here? What are you doing is more the question, Hemmig said, as she held the lantern up to his face. Grog recoiled from the blinding light. Thandur's tits, woman! Put that thing down! Hemmig lowered the lantern to her side. It threw a flickering combination of light and shadow on her wrinkled old face. So, where are you going? Well, I'm... Grog trailed off, gesturing weakly down the road. I'm going to help. The darkness didn't hide how vigorously Hemmig's eyes rolled beneath her bushy brows. Help! She scoffed. You're drunk off your head. You fat fool. You were at the Goblin's Head from open until close today. So were you, Grog protested. Aye, but I'm not lurching down the street in nothing but a pair of grotty underpants, trying to be a hero. Grog looked down, but was unable to confirm or deny the state of his undergarments, because his prodigious and, admittedly naked, stomach got in the way. And how do you plan on helping? Hemmig continued. I'm not a great ex-general like you, but I the sound of steel on steel, if I'm not mistaken. What were you planning on fighting with? Your bad breath? The ridiculousness of Grog's semi-naked, unarmed stroll into town crystallized into embarrassment, which was further exaggerated when he looked around and saw that a few other dwarves had emerged from their houses to observe Emmy telling them off. At least 8 dwarves were now standing in their doorways, with candles or lanterns in their hands, and terrified expressions on their faces. The watchtower horn, which had been blaring away the entire time, suddenly died mid-blast. Hope flared in Grog's chest that this signaled the end of the mysterious disturbance. But that hope was snuffed out almost instantly as the sounds of battle rushed in to fill the sonic void, seeming suddenly to grow louder and closer. "We need to go!" Himig shouted to the gathering crowd of dwarves. "Come on, Grog, you ale-soaked sausage! Let's make for the woods!" "You mean run away?" Grog asked. "Of course, run away," Himig said. "Let me grab some things and we'll go." "No!" The anger in Grog's shout clearly startled Himig, but it startled Grog even more. "I mean, I can't, but you should." Himig sighed and gave Grog a slow nod. "I understand. Just wait here a moment then." She turned and tottered back towards her house. "I need to give you something," she said over her shoulder. Grog waited, trying to avoid the stares of curious children standing in doorways, while the silhouettes of their parents could be seen through candlelit windows, frantically grabbing meager possessions. "Here!" Himig came bustling back down the garden path. She had her lantern in one hand, a large battle axe in the other, and a steel helm perched atop her head. "These belonged to Medavig. I've kept them all these years." She passed over the axe, almost reluctantly, then squished the helm down over Grog's mass of wild black hair, pressing the nose guard painfully against the bridge of his nose. "Thanks, Himig," Grog muttered. "I'll take good care of them." "Aye, you'd better," Himig said. "And while you're at it, you can take good care of yourself too, you silly fat bastard." She gave him an affectionate pat on the stomach, then headed back to her house. With nothing left to do but continue on up the street, looking and feeling utterly absurd, and headed straight into the guts of some sort of horrible, violent trouble. Grog gripped the battle axe with both hands, and did just that.